Today I'll show you how to knit the mistake rib infinity scarf. This is a great scarf for beginners because it's made up entirely of knits and purls. It's also really quick to knit up because we're using super chunky yarn. So download the full pattern in the description, print it out, and follow along. I've also made video chapters in the description so you can easily navigate through this video. So a note about construction. This infinity scarf is not knit in the round, it's knit flat like a scarf, and at the end we'll just seam it up, which I'll show you how to do later on. For this scarf, I used 4 balls of Lana Grossa Ragazza yarn. This is a super bulky merino yarn and it equals about 176 yards. I knit up all the yarn before I could take a photo, so that's why I'm using the product photo. And I'll throw links to all the materials in the description. I also used 10mm knitting needles. I like bamboo needles because it grips the yarn and is less slippery to work with. I also used a tapestry needle for seaming, a tape measure, and split ring stitch markers, which are optional. Alright, so I'm going to cast on 21 stitches. I'll use the long tail cast on, so I'm leaving like a bit of a tail here. I think that's enough for 21 stitches. And I'll make my slip knot, here we go, and place it on my needle. Now if you don't know how to do the long tail cast on, then check out this video here where the eye is, and learn how to do that and come back here and cast on your stitches. Okay, so I'm casting on 21 stitches according to the pattern. Now if you're using like a thinner yarn or a thicker yarn and you want to cast on a different number of stitches, like you want a less wide or a wider infinity scarf, you can actually do that. You can just cast on a multiple of 4 plus 1. Okay, so what does that mean? All it means is that you need to cast on a multiple of 4. So 4, 8, 16, 20, 24, 28, and then add 1 to it. Okay, so you could cast on like 24, which is a multiple of 4, and then add 1, which is 25. So you could cast on 25 stitches. For our infinity scarf, I'm casting on 21 stitches. 20 is a multiple of 4, and I've added 1 to it, so that's 21. Alright, so let's get into our stitch pattern. Okay, so the stitch pattern is actually quite simple. It is made up of 2 rows, row 1 and row 2. So let's go through row 1 first. Okay, so what I'm going to do is slip 1 knitwise. So I'm going to push my needle into my first stitch as if I were going to knit, and then just slip it off of the left needle. So next what I'm going to do is knit 1. So here we go, knit 1, cool. And then I'm going to start my repeat. Okay, so you can see this little asterisk here. That basically signals the beginning of the repeat. Okay, so it goes asterisk, purl 2, so I'm going to bring my yarn up front to do a purl 2. So here we're going to purl 1. Okay, and then we're gonna purl 2. This is my second purl stitch, so purl it up. Yeah, all right. And then we're going to knit 2. So here we go, knit 1 and knit 2. All right, so now our instructions say to repeat from the star or the asterisk. So that's what our repeat is basically. Purl 2 and knit 2. So we'll go all the way back to purl 2. All right, here we go, purl 2 and knit 2. So here we go, knit 2. So it says that we need to repeat from star to last 3 stitches. Okay, so I've just finished that repeat, right? I did purl 2 and then a knit 2, so now I'm back to a purl 2. Okay, so we're gonna continue this purl 2, knit 2 until we get to our last 3 stitches, at which point we're going to purl 2 and knit 1. So let's do that. And now I've got my last 3 stitches. So what I'm going to do is purl 2, as my instructions say, and then here's my purl 2, cool. And then here's my last stitch, and I'm going to knit 1. Perfect. Okay, so that is my row 1. So I'm going to turn my needle over and we're going to work row 2. So for row 2, we're going to slip 1 purlwise. And what that means is I'm going to take my right needle and go into this first stitch as if I were going to purl. When we purl, we usually have our yarn in front, right? So I'm going to slip my right needle into this first stitch, make sure my yarn is in front. Okay, so I'm just going to throw it over my needle. So my needle is behind my working yarn, and then I'm just going to slip that first stitch off of my needle. So that's a slip one purlwise. All right, so next I'm going to purl one, and conveniently my yarn is already in the front, so I'm just going to purl into it. Cool. All right, so now come the asterisks. So the pattern goes asterisk, knit 2, purl 2. So I'm gonna bring my yarn to the back because now we're doing a knit 2. So here we go, knit 2, here we go, knit 2, and then purl 2. So here we go, purl 2. All right, so that is basically our repeat. So we're gonna repeat this knit 2, purl 2 across the whole row until we get to our last 3 stitches. So let's just do that, all right? Repeating a knit 2, purl 2. So it's actually very similar to row 1, right? And here we go, that was my last purl 2, and now I've got 3 stitches left, and I'm just going to knit 2, here we go, and purl 1. Awesome, so that is our row 2. All right, so now I would just turn my needle over and work row 1 all over again, right? So that would just be a slip 1 knitwise, knit 1, and purl 2. All right, so these 2 rows make up the mistake rib, so you would just alternate between row 1 and row 2. So work these 2 rows until your scarf measures 42 inches if you plan on blocking, or around 48 inches if you don't want to block. All right, so happy mistake rib knitting. So the reason why you need to slip your first stitch purlwise and knitwise is so that you'll get this really nice selvage edge on your scarf. So here you can see it on this side, and right here you can see this really nice edge, right? So that's what slipping our stitches can do. Okay, so you might be wondering, like, how am I gonna keep row 1 and row 2 straight in my head? At some point you might just lose track, right? You might forget, am I supposed to be working row 1 here or row 2? It's kind of hard to remember. Okay, so I've got a little hack for you. If the first stitch on your row is a purl stitch, and I can tell by this little purl bump here, then I should be working row 2, right? Because I need to slip 1 purlwise on row 2. On the other hand, if the first stitch of the row is a knit stitch, as you can see right here, you can kind of see that little V shape, then you should be working a row 1, okay? So row 1, I'm gonna slip 1 knitwise, and then knit 1. So I know that this is gonna be a row 1 that I need to work because my first stitch on the row was a knit stitch. Alrighty, so don't get confused, just look to your knitting and it'll give you hints about what row you should be working. So now my scarf measures around 42 inches. Look how long it is, woo! So when I wrap it around my neck, it looks a little short, but I can fix that by blocking the scarf later on. So I could knit this a little bit longer, but I don't have any more yarn. I didn't buy enough, which was a pretty dumb move, but blocking this will give me 5 or 6 more inches, so I'm okay for now. So just FYI, I used 150 yards of super bulky weight yarn. So if you have more yarn, you can always knit the scarf to the exact length that you like instead of blocking. Totally up to you. So now it's time to cast off, which means we're gonna get this scarf off of our needle. So I'm gonna do a regular old cast off. We don't need to make our cast off very nice because when we seam, our cast off edge is gonna be hidden. So there's no point making it really pretty. So I've just knit 2 stitches and I'm gonna go under the first stitch and bring it over the second stitch. And I've just cast it off 1. Okay, so here we go again. I'm gonna knit 2 on my right needle, go into that first stitch and bring it over the second stitch. And just continue going. So knit 1 and bring my needle into the first stitch over the second stitch. So as you can see, there's this nice cast off edge forming. So we'll do that across the whole row until we reach our last stitch. Oh yeah, so keep a loose hand as you're casting off. Don't grip your yarn too tightly. Keep it nice and loose and your cast off edge will be nice and stretchy. All right, so here I'm near the end of my row and here we go, cool. So normally you would just cut off like a length of yarn here, snip, snip, and then like weave it into your scarf, right? But we're gonna do something a little bit different, okay? So just stay with me here. Do not cut off your yarn yet. So what we're gonna do is just measure out a length of yarn that is 7 times the width of our cast off edge, okay? At least 7 times. So we're just gonna go like this, okay? We'll measure out this yarn. Here's one width, okay? 2, 3, 4, 5, whoops, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, cool. So this is a length of yarn that is 7 times the width of my cast off edge. And then once I have that, I'm gonna just cut it off, right? There we go, cool. Alrighty, so now I can bring this yarn through this last stitch and fully cast off my scarf. Okay, I just took the length of yarn, here we go, wrap it around my needle, and then just bring this stitch on my needle over the yarn. Okay, here it is, and just pull the whole length of yarn through that last stitch, pull it tight, and now we're fully cast off. Woohoo, yeah. Okay, so explanation time. Why do we need this long length of yarn? It's weird and like, what? Okay, so what we're gonna do is we need to seam our scarf together, right? So that it actually becomes an infinity scarf. So next, we're actually going to put the 2 sides of our scarf together and then use this long length of yarn to seam the 2 ends together so that our scarf becomes an infinity scarf. So you guessed it, next we're going to talk all about seaming. Ooh, so before we seam, we need to weave in the ends of our yarn. So this is the cast on edge of our scarf, and this is the leftover from our cast on, okay? So we need to weave in this into our scarf before we seam our scarf together. So let's do that real quick. All right, so let's do this. I've got my tapestry needle here. This is just like, looks like a giant sewing needle, and I can use this to weave in my ends. Okay, so I'm gonna take my yarn tail here and just gonna like, try to thread it through my tapestry needle. There we go. Cool. So we're just gonna basically hide this length of yarn in our scarf. So what I like to do is look for the little purl bumps. Purl bumps are a great place to camouflage our yarn. So here I can see there's like a little bump here, right? So I'm just gonna go into this little purl bump. Here we go. Cool, yeah. All right, and so I'll go into these little stitches like 5 or 6 times. I basically just want to secure this yarn tail and kind of camouflage it in my yarn, okay? So let's take a look here. I'm on the edge of my scarf. I don't want to like disrupt this nice knit column. So I'm just gonna go like underneath that knit stitch, okay? All right, this is pretty lawless. I don't have any really hard or fast rules for weaving in the ends. We're just securing this little yarn tail in place. So let's see, let's go in here. Little purl bump. Here's a little purl bumpy. And let's go in like one more time. Let's just go in another time. We'll just try and camouflage it right near that knit column. Okay, so that looks pretty okay. I mean, you know, if you're looking for it, if you're really searching, you could probably find our woven in tail, but most people are not looking, and I'm pretty satisfied with that. I'm just gonna stretch it out a little bit, okay, and then just snip it off right there. Cool, get out of here. Ugh, I can't get the scissors off my hand. Okay, here's our little tail end. Let's just get rid of it. And now one end of our scarf looks awesome, and you can barely even see where the yarn tail is. Cool, so now we can seam our scarf together. so now you're gonna decide which side of your scarf you want to be the good side, okay? So that means the side that's gonna be facing out, the side that everyone is gonna see, right? Not the side that's facing your body, okay? So if you don't really have a preference, then it doesn't really matter. For me, I kind of like this side a little bit better. So what we're gonna do is put the right sides of our scarf together, okay? So again, this is my right side or my good side, and you know, this side is also my right side. So we're gonna place them together, and then we're going to seam our scarf together here. So I'm gonna get out my tapestry needle and just thread up this super long yarn tail here. All right, there we go. I've got it on my needle, cool. And I've also got these little split ring stitch markers. And what these are for is they're meant to help me line up my scarf, okay? So let's take a look here. Now you can see that we have these lovely columns of knit stitches, right? So I want these columns of knits to line up when I'm seaming it, right? I want it to be like really nicely aligned like this. So what I'm gonna do with these little stitch markers is I'm going to match up those knit columns on the front and the back of my work here. So here's a knit column, right? And here is the corresponding knit column here. So I'm just going to match them up, and I'm going to use my stitch marker to just kind of not tie them in place, but kind of just hold them in place there, right? And let's just go across this whole scarf. Now, if you don't have these markers, that's okay. You can use like a safety pin or even like a bobby pin. You can get kind of creative with that as well. All right, so there we go. We can take a look at our two ends, and I can see that, yes, the columns match up pretty nicely. All right, so yes, I'm being like really careful, kind of extra, but that's because I want that seam to look almost invisible. All right, so let's get started. So we're gonna use something called the backstitch method. This is very common in hand sewing, and I think it'll work really nicely with this scarf as well. Okay, so I've got my yarn. It's coming out of the back of my scarf. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go through the front of my scarf like this. Okay, so I'm gonna go like 1/2 inch from the edge, okay? And I'm gonna pull the needle through, just like this, okay? And now you'll see the reason why this is called backstitch is we're gonna go back behind where the yarn came out, okay? So here my needle is gonna go behind this yarn all the way to the edge, pretty much, right? Right up to the edge of my scarf, okay? Pretty good. And through to the other side, and I'm gonna pull it through. Now I'm gonna bring my needle, it's on the back now, I'm gonna bring it, just poke it in through to the front, okay, like about an inch or so from the edge. Okay, poke it all the way through. Okay, and then pull the yarn through. Cool. All right, so now our yarn is in the front again. And we're gonna take our needle and go behind the yarn. We're gonna go back, okay? So I'm just gonna go like a tiny bit back, right underneath the cast off edge, and I'm gonna poke my needle through to the other side, and then I'm gonna grab, okay, a bit of fabric from the back, just a tiny bit, and then push my needle through to the front, just like this, okay? So you can see there's like needle, strand of yarn, needle, okay? We've kind of sandwiched the strand of yarn with our needle, and then I'm going to pull the yarn through. Bam. All right, so I'm gonna give my yarn a bit of a tug just to tighten it, okay? Tighten that seam, and now you can see our yarn is in the front again, and we're gonna go back behind it, okay? Push that needle through, all right? To the other side, to the back side, and here's our knit column. I'm just gonna make sure it's aligned on the front, and it is. Okay, so here we go. We're on the back, and we're just gonna grab a bit of fabric on the back, push it into the front, and now you can see that our needle is kind of sandwiching the strand of yarn, and we'll pull through, tighten it up, and tug, okay? And again, our yarn is in the front. We're gonna take our needle, push it behind that strand of yarn, okay? To the back, grab a little from the back and then push the needle into the front. Okay, so needle, yarn strand, needle. And then pull it through again. Okay, so we're gonna go again. Here's our strand of yarn. We're gonna go behind it, just like this, through to the other side. I just wanna catch it right below the cast off edge, and then grab a bit from the back, and then push into the front, and then pull it through. So you're kind of getting the hang of it. You know what you're gonna need to do next? Here's a strand of yarn. We're gonna go behind it, all right, like around here. Push it to the back, grab a bit of the back, push through to the front. There we go. Needle, yarn, needle, and pull it through. Okay, so that's really all there is to backstitch. Okay, strand of yarn, go behind the strand of yarn a wee bit, just a wee bit. All right, grab some from the back. Okay, push into the front. Periodically take a look at the knit columns, make sure they're lining up on the front and the back, and then just work your way seaming across the whole seam of your scarf. All right, so I'm nearing the end of my scarf and I'm just making sure that it lines up really neatly. I'm just going to hold it like that. Okay, we're almost there. Here we go, and pull it through. Go behind our strand of yarn, and here we go. I'm like right at the edge here, really close to finishing. Let's pull our yarn through, and let's just do like another, what's it called? Another stitch. I'm gonna pull the yarn through to the back, just pull it all there. And once I get to this little edge here, I'm gonna be like real careful to make sure I get all of the edge in, okay? So I'm just going through here again. Okay, and maybe I'll just do another stitch, all right, here, right at the edge, because I want to make sure it's like perfectly kind of closed up. Here we go. Push that over here, and here we go. So it looks nice and closed and secure now. Let's take a look at how our knit stitches line up. And they look fabulous, if I do say so myself. I'm just gonna undo these little stitch markers. And wow, it looks really nice. I'm always like amazed when things turn out the way they're supposed to. I don't know why, but yeah, it looks really nice, right? You can see that seam. It's a little bit thick, but that's because our yarn is quite thick. And this is what it looks like on the wrong side of our work. And on the right side, let's take a look. Heyo, not bad at all. You can see that the knit stitches line up really nicely, and like it's a little bit chunky, but we can get rid of that chunkiness when we block out this scarf. Okay, but let's finish up our seam. Okay, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Okay, so we've closed up the edge here, and now I'm gonna weave in the ends of my yarn. Cool, so I'm just gonna stick my needle into this little purl stitch here. As I mentioned earlier, I love using purl stitches to weave in my ends, kind of camouflage the yarn. Here we go, and let's do this like a couple times. Let's go into like 5 or 6 stitches here, okay? Okay, cool. All right, so I'm just gonna stretch out this area where I wove in my ends. And now I'll take my little scissor and just cut it loose. And whoa, ta-da! Our scarf is now joined in the round. I'm gonna turn it over to the right side. And our seam looks not too bad at all. Looking pretty good on both sides. If your infinity scarf fits you exactly how you like, then awesome, you're basically done. But if you're like me and your infinity scarf is a little bit shorter than what you'd like, then you can block your infinity scarf, which is what we're gonna do next. So I've got a tub here that I've filled with some room temperature water. So it's not cold, it's not warm, it's just sort of like meh kind of water. Okay, so I've got my infinity scarf here and I'm just gonna submerge it into this tub of water. Here we go. Whoa, look at it go. Awesome. So we just want to push the scarf under the water. I'm kind of like trying to drown it. That's a little bit sinister, but you know, I really want the fibers of my cowl to be submerged. So the more that you need to stretch your cowl, the longer it should stay in the tub, okay? So now it's like fully submerged and I'm just gonna leave it alone, soaking in this tub for like 20 minutes. So our scarf has been sitting here for about 20 minutes. So now I'm just going to push out as much water as I can, okay? So whoopsie. So I'm not like wringing out the scarf. I'm kind of just pushing out the water, or as much water as I can. So here is my super wet scarf. I've just laid it out on top of a bath mat here. And now I'm going to stretch out my scarf to the length that I want it to be. Okay, so I know that my final length should be 48 inches. That's the target circumference. So 48 into 2 is 24. All right, so this half of the scarf should measure out to 24 inches. Let's see, and it's 23 right now, so I need to stretch it out so that it's 24. And is that gonna do the trick? And maybe a little bit more over here. And there we go, that is exactly 24, perfect. All right, so now that I know that the length is right, I wanna make sure that the width is exactly the same throughout the whole scarf, okay? So you can see over here where the edge is, it's like splayed out. In the middle, it looks a little bit thinner. So let's say I want it to be 7.5 inches. So I'm gonna pull down this area here so that it's 7.5, and then just go across my whole scarf, make sure that it is 7.5 all the way through. It's a little bit thicker here, so I'm just gonna like kind of scrunch it up a little bit. So that's the great thing about blocking, is that you can really manipulate your knitting when it's wet. And when it dries, your knitting will basically dry in that shape, right? So it's great. You can kind of push and pull your scarf so that it becomes the shape that you want it to be. All right, so now it looks really nice and even. So now all I need to do is just leave it alone, make yourself a sandwich, relax, come back the next day, and you'll have a beautiful infinity scarf that you can wear. All right, so it's been about 2 days and my scarf is now fully dried. Ooh, it's so soft. So it looks awesome. It still measures 48 inches and it measures 7.5 inches down this way too. So it dried exactly in the shape that I left it in. It looks awesome. And I also want to show you that the seam, after blocking, it's kind of flattened out a bit. It used to be a little bit bumpy, and after blocking, it's nice and flat. Now the inside still has this big chunky seam, but that's okay because it's on the inside of my infinity scarf, so I can always hide it. All right, so that's pretty much it. Now I have an infinity scarf on my hands. I can throw it over my head and wear it out and admire it and let everybody know that, hey, I just knit this. Yeah, I'm kind of a domestic goddess now. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'm Davina from sheepandstitch.com. Thanks so much for watching. Keep warm, happy knitting, and I'll see you next time. Bye.